I'm Joe Nobody, as far as, this is concerned, but I've noticed something and I wanted to point it out to you about economics, and I just wanted to share my observations with you. I wouldn't advise you to completely go out and act on this information and bet on it more than you can actually afford to lose. Don't bet the farm on me. Please don't. I don't want to be responsible for that kind of thing. But as a funny, as I'm beginning to analyze things, I read about why the Fed is ultimately afraid and terrified, and why the central bank's worst nightmare was deflation. But I wanted to point something out, which is about the quantity theory of money, and I wanted to do a better job of stating, my objection than other people have, pointed out, which is, other people say that it's just flat out wrong, and I would say that the quantity theory of money isn't useful in the real world. It's not that it's wrong, it's that it like, so it, the equation is MVPY, which, as far as that's concerned, in that whole thing, money is equal to the M is equal to the supply of money in the economy at any given time. V is the velocity of money, meaning how many times the average dollar is spent in a given period of time. P is the average price of goods and services, and Y is the total quantity of all goods and services sold during the time period in question. Well, if we look at what most people have been listening to, and we listen to the economists that are prominent and popular, the Austrian school, and we look at what they say themselves about deflation, or about inflation and the inflation equations, there's a few things. They basically say in their things that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So to them, inflation isn't rising prices. Inflation to them means an increase in the money supply itself, you know? And for me, when I say inflation as a term, I mean the price of goods and services has risen. But I noticed something, that I think would be really well stated for a lot of people to look into, which is just that the Austrian school, when it comes to the quantity theory of money, that um that whole that whole theory that was put forward by Mises himself rests on a couple of starting assumptions, that are really, that you really need to get at, because the starting assumptions are actually bad starting assumptions. It causes a really big problem for Mises, in that we don't, I guess I could say that it's a little bit, it goes a little bit far too far when Jason Unruh says the quantity theory of money is wrong, would be what most economists said with it. But I would say that the quantity theory of money isn't useful in the real world because it rests on a bunch of starting assumptions that don't actually hold true in reality, which is that the quantity theory of money presupposes, before we even get towards using it, that the velocity of money is stable. And yet, if we look at the Fed's charts about monetary philosophy, all I have to do is link this to you, in the underbar. But if we look at the chart for the M2 money supply, what we can see in the chart is that, sometime around, the tail. Okay, so basically, ever since roughly, like, sometime like the monetary velocities peak kind of began sometime like way back in like 1997, and ever since then it's basically gone, but down by little, and then down kind of fast, and then back up just a little bit, and then it goes back to a downtrend, and then down, and then, a slide down, and then a little bit up, and then finally it falls off a cliff, sometime around like 2009, and like 2019, in like the third and fourth, quarter. And then, right back during quarter three of 2020, it goes up a little bit, and then it begins to slide, and then it goes up a little bit, and then it goes back into a downtrend, you know. And what we, back, into quarter one of 20, and now as of quarter 20, Quarter 1 2020, it's down, and it's heading in a downward direction, as far as the money supply and the Fed's chart of data is concerned. And what that indicates is that the velocity of money is not stable. And so, in the equation, that we're talking about, as far as all that stuff's concerned, where, MVPQ, those all, the quantity theory of money, as stated by the Mycenaeans, basically rest rest upon a faulty starting assumption, that doesn't actually hold true in reality, and therefore it's not that it's wrong, it's that it's useless, you know like Mises is, and there, and unless a real world situation existed where the velocity of money was actually stable, that theory is useless in the real world, you know and that's a much better way of stating it, so you can't debunk that. I mean, like, it's got a bad starting assumption, and so we can't use it to model reality.